Okay, this morning was the Leaving Certificate Irish 2024, paper number 2, which was based on the literature and the comprehension. I'm going to deal with this paper in reverse order. That's generally the way I advise you to answer it on the day of the exam. So starting with question 4. Students would have a choice between 4A down to 4F. The vast majority of students in Ireland would take the play on Thrill. Now in the on Thrill question today, it was obviously based on characters. The influence of shame on the way many of the characters treated the young unmarried girl. And the most important part of that would be shame and characters. So therefore you'll be dealing with the shame on Banny Cohusig, shame on Banny Kinselig, Liam, Sean, Anya Neve Razzle. Very, very student-friendly question. You would be very, very familiar with it, dealing with the negative people. That was an okay question. Students would have had no difficulty, major difficulty with it. Another question is question 4F, Philarish. It may not have been the students' favourite poem, but the questions were very, very straightforward. The question number 1 was dealing with the main theme. Now, while this was asked 4 times in the Leaving, Philarish has cropped up 4 times since 2012. This very question, the main theme, is the 3rd time they asked the question, in the very same order, the very same vocabulary. Students would have had no difficulty understanding it, and they would have dealt with the theme from start to finish. You had to deal with that, develop the theme. Question number 2 dealt with the metaphor of the door. That would have been a question that featured on a mock in recent years, the metaphor of the door. And question number 3, the poem is full of orders. So that question would have been dealing with language. How effective are the orders? Well, we would have said, obviously, the orders are very effective. Marthash Bon and Shay Farrak on Ella, the anger of the poet. Agus Thon Fille, Kainka Dirach, Leshan Lehor, talking directly to the reader. Tushka will na herda has the Kate Farsa Ivaruha, the orders are in the first person singular. So if students have been taking the Dawn to Brescia 4F in school, I think they would have been delighted with that question. They would have been very, very familiar with it. Moving then back to question number 3. Question number 3 was the poetry, and you had a choice. You had a choice between Gavin and you had a choice between Antarakir. Gavin would have been widely anticipated this year. The first question was dealing with the contrast between the 2 different periods of the animal's life. The H1 student might be a little bit disappointed in that question. It was easy enough, but they couldn't have maybe dealt with it being allegorical. They might have wanted to show off saying it was metaphorical, and they didn't have that opportunity. And the reason why is because you've dealt with solely the life of the animal. But the question was very straightforward. And in question number 3, again, who composed the poem? Write a note on the life and the work of the poet. Students will know that as a type of sort of generic type answer, a question and answer that they know inside out before they go into the exam. Having said that, I do think that the vast majority of students today will have answered on Tarakir. Again, like yesterday, there's a great sense here of déjà vu. Question number 1 was dealing with the memories of the type of life on the island. Nice question, 15 marks. The next question dealt with repetition. Repetition was asked in 2012, and also the very same question was asked in 2019. And then in question number 3, if you hadn't this prepared, it would have been testing. But having said that, I know that many students had it prepared, and that was dealing with adjectives. Adjectives, a lovely question, 9 marks, fairly heavily weighted. And again, adjectives was asked in 2016. So if you're a student who was very familiar with past exam papers, you wouldn't have found the poetry challenging at all today. In fact, I think you'd be delighted when you would have opened both Gavin and Antarakir. Further back, question number 2 might have thrown a type of spanner in the works slightly with the reappearance of Dish. Dish is a story that a lot of students find quite challenging. The question was okay, but the problem was it featured last year, the same story. So I don't think students would have been anticipating it. And if they had sort of put this story on the back burner and said, we'll take a chance and not study Dish, then they would have been left with no choice at all. But the question then they would have had to have done was based on Cockamillish. And that would have been very, very, very hotly tipped for this year. And indeed, the question was a grand question between the relationship of the 2 people on the train. Paul and Catherine. So the relationship between the two of them, that's the first point you would have to deal with. But the second point is, and the tragic end. So remember, not only is a relationship, Sinead, is very biased, cléanta, but you also have to deal with the tragic end. So again, there are two parts to it. They're not going to be equal, say maybe a page on the relationship and a page on the tragic end. But again, it's an area where the H1 would need to have honed in and know, I have to deal with the tragic end, and it's a separate issue to the relationship between the two of them. But again, the vocabulary in the questions wouldn't have thrown up any difficulty whatsoever. So that's the prescribed material. So when we then go to question number 1, they would be 2 comprehensions, and students don't have a choice. You have to deal with both. The first one dealt with the islands, national policy on the islands, etc. Very student-friendly, vocabulary very accessible, didn't show any problematic vocabulary or language difficulties at all. The questions on question 1 to 5 were taken directly from the answer, and I don't think students would have had any difficulty with that. The Aimshe question was very straightforward. Sarah Brehers and Aimshe Roshtanach, agus bresh came na hadiachta in question number 4. In question number 2, in paragraph 4, I should say. In question 6b, it is the only answer that had to be in your own words. So in other words, if you're taking your answers directly from the piece on 1 to 5, you have your 35 out of 50. And then, by and large, students always get question 6a. So in other words, you have your 40 out of 50. So if you think of it, if there are 10 marks going for 6b, on a very bad day, students will get 5. So in other words, you're getting 45 out of 50. And if that were to be replicated into the second Léamh Uiscint, you've actually arrived at a H1 in that question, even though 5 is quite a low mark. Many of you will get 7, 8, once it's in Duchel Féin in your own words. Léamh Uiscint number 1, I found fine, no problem whatsoever. But in Léamh Uiscint Ivera though, it dealt with artificial intelligence. Now that's a very contemporary topic, so contemporary in fact that not many students will be very familiar with it through Irish language for this year. And the title on Intellect Therga, that meant artificial intelligence, they repeated that vocabulary maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 times throughout the entire piece. It was more challenging, definitely. And if you hadn't understood that title, you would have found it, you would have been an uphill struggle. But having said that, again, the questions were okay. The answers came directly from the piece. But what would have slowed you up and maybe pose a difficulty would be then answering question 6b in your own words if you had not copped on to the fact it was artificial intelligence. But that is only then 10 marks out of, think of it, 100 for the 2 Léamh Uiscints put together. All in all, it's over. I am delighted with that paper. I think the vast majority of students will breathe a sigh of relief. It was great. I can't really criticise that paper at all. So you've had a great start with the Irish. Other subjects have done very, very well. So best foot forward for the rest of the Leaving Cert, and well done to you all. Thank you.